Morbid Facts, Part 660. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC at the age of 32, his body reportedly showed no signs of decomposition for 6 days, astonishing the ancient Greeks and fueling the belief that he was a god. But modern medical experts have proposed a much darker explanation. Alexander may have suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes full body paralysis while leaving the person mentally aware. If true, it means he may have been mistakenly declared dead while still conscious, and was ultimately buried alive, fully aware of what was happening but unable to move or speak. In 1969, the Black Panthers launched a free breakfast program that fed thousands of hungry kids before school in the poorest black communities. But J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI saw it as a threat to national security, apparently fearing that it would make the Black Panthers look too humane. So in response, in multiple cities, police raided kitchens at dawn, tearing apart food supplies and in some cases even urinating on the groceries, making it clear that feeding black children was more threatening than letting them starve. Morbid Facts, Part 661. Tila Tequila was one of the internet's first ever influencers, rising to fame on MySpace before landing an MTV dating show that made her a household name. But after the spotlight faded, her life spiraled into chaos, marked by heavy drug use, mental breakdowns, and increasingly disturbing behavior. She once claimed to have died and been resurrected, called herself the Queen of the Alt-Right, and posed in Nazi uniforms giving the Hitler salute in front of Auschwitz. After being banned from several platforms including Twitter and Facebook, Tila later declared herself a celestial being who was sent here to destroy Satan. In 1967, Singapore was gripped by a bizarre mass panic known as Coro or genital retraction syndrome, where thousands of men became convinced their schlongolians were shrinking into their bodies and that they would die if it vanished completely. Fueled by rumors that tainted pork was to blame, hospitals were flooded with terrified men clutching their groins, some even using clamps or strings to hold it in place. Over 400 cases were reported within just a few days. Pork sales plummeted, and public health officials had to step in to calm the chaos. Morbid Facts, Part 662. In the early 90s, Andrew Martinez became a bizarre campus icon at UC Berkeley for attending classes completely nude, claiming he was protesting what he saw as oppressive social norms. Nicknamed the Naked Guy, he was repeatedly arrested, eventually expelled, and banned from campus after the school changed its policies just to stop him. But behind the act was a deepening struggle with mental illness that was later diagnosed as schizophrenia. Over the next decade, his life unraveled into a cycle of homelessness, institutionalization, and jail time. In 2006, at just 33 years old, Martinez was found dead by suicide in a Santa Clara jail cell. In 1965, 22-year-old Lester Eubanks brutally murdered 14-year-old Mary Ellen Diener after attempting to rape her behind a house near a laundromat, shooting her twice, going home to change, then returning to bludgeon her to death with a brick upon realizing she was still alive. He was sentenced to death, but in 1972, just 3 days before his scheduled execution, Lester's sentence was commuted when Ohio temporarily suspended the death penalty. Declared a model prisoner, Eubanks was granted a bizarre privilege the next year, an unsupervised Christmas shopping trip at a mall. At some point, he walked away and simply vanished, and has been on the run ever since. Morbid Facts, Part 663. In January of 2024, 29-year-old Nolan Arbaugh became the first human to receive a Neuralink brain implant after being paralyzed in a diving accident. Though the surgery was celebrated as a milestone, things quickly unraveled. 85% of the device's threads retracted from his brain, crippling its function. Neuralink scrambled to deploy emergency software fixes just to keep it working, allowing Nolan to play chess and move a cursor with his thoughts. The surgery carried serious risks including infection, brain damage, and long-term complications. Arbaugh's implant was never removed, and the company hasn't disclosed the full extent of its ongoing effects. In 2017, retired U.S. Army Colonel David Will Riggins was awarded $8.4 million in a defamation lawsuit after a woman publicly accused him of raping her decades earlier when they were cadets at West Point. Just as Riggins was being considered for promotion as Brigadier General, the accusation was posted on a blog, effectively derailing his military career. But an investigation soon found no supporting evidence, and a Virginia jury later determined the woman's claims were provably false. Although the final payout was reduced to around $2.3 million, Riggins said he was grateful to have his name cleared, even if the damage to his career couldn't be undone. Morbid Facts, Part 664. In 2013, Caleb McGilvery, aka Kai the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker, went viral after a wild TV interview where he described stopping an attacker with a hatchet, shouting,
"Smash, smash, smash!"
But just a few months later, he was arrested for the murder of 73-year-old lawyer Joseph Galfy in New Jersey. Galfy was found beaten to death in his own home, as Kai had reportedly punched, kicked, and stomped him until he died. Kai claimed it was self-defense after being drugged and sexually assaulted, but prosecutors said there was no evidence in his favor. He was convicted of first-degree murder in 2019 and sentenced to 57 years in prison. In 2014, Jose Salvador Alvarenga was rescued after surviving 438 days lost at sea, a journey that began when his fishing boat was blown off course in Mexico. He drifted over 6,000 miles across the Pacific in a small boat, surviving by eating raw fish, turtles, and seabirds, while drinking rainwater, turtle blood, and his own pee. When he finally washed ashore in the Marshall Islands, he was sunburnt, emaciated, and clutching a knife in terror. Though his story was initially met with skepticism, experts later confirmed it was entirely plausible, setting the record for the longest solo survival at sea by far. Morbid Facts, Part 665. In July of 2023, Australian woman Erin Patterson invited her ex-in-laws and their relatives over for lunch, serving them a homemade beef Wellington laced with one of the deadliest fungi on Earth, death cap mushrooms. Within a few days, 3 of them were dead from agonizing organ failure, and a 4th barely survived after a liver transplant. Patterson claimed it was a tragic accident, but investigators found damning evidence, including a food dehydrator tied to the poison and inconsistent stories about where the mushrooms came from. She was recently convicted of 3 counts of murder and likely faces life in prison. In the mid-1800s, women across the Western world wore massive crinolines, hoop skirts that ballooned outward in all directions, often made from highly flammable fabrics like cotton. The size made them elegant but deadly. They caught fire easily near candles or fireplaces, and the sheer width made them nearly impossible to escape the flames. Within just 2 months in 1863, 19 English women burnt to death after their dresses caught fire. By the end of the decade, more than 3,000 people had died as a result of crinoline fires. Morbid Facts, Part 666. In Dante's Inferno, hell is divided into 9 circles, each one reserved for a specific sin. Today we take a tour of these 9 circles with real-life stories to match. Jean Meslier was a Catholic priest for 40 years, known for his extensive charity work and devotion. But after his death in 1729, a hidden 633-page manuscript revealed that he had secretly been an atheist the entire time. He admitted to becoming a priest only to please his parents, called religion a castle in the air, and condemned faith as a tool of oppression. Tamika Hargrave died while cheating on her husband with her car mechanic. They were getting it on inside of a closed garage while the car was still running and eventually passed out from carbon monoxide. Their unclothed bodies were later found by Tamika's husband. In 2004, Gail Laverne Grimes died in the hospital after doctors spent 6 exhausting hours trying to separate her skin from a couch. The 500-pound woman had been sitting on her living room sofa for 6 years to the point where her skin had completely fused to the fabric. Rescue workers had to transport Gail and her couch using a trailer, and she ended up dying while still attached to it. Known as the Witch of Wall Street, Hetty Green was once the richest woman in America. But she became infamous for her overly obsessive frugality. She refused to pay for heat, medical care, or clean clothes. Her son's leg once had to be amputated because she delayed treatment while searching for a free clinic. Hetty eventually died from a stroke while arguing over the cost of skim milk. In 1982, South Korean police officer Woo Bum Khan went on one of the deadliest killing rampages in world history. After his girlfriend woke him up by swatting a fly that was on his chest, he armed himself with rifles, grenades, and a service revolver, then spent the entire night moving from village to village, posing as a cop while massacring civilians in their homes. He cut phone lines, lobbed grenades into houses, and shot entire families in their sleep. By dawn, 56 people were dead and dozens more were injured. As police closed in, he ended the fury by taking his own life. Jim Jones began as a fiery Christian preacher with a passion for social justice. But behind the scenes, he rejected the Bible, called himself the reincarnation of Jesus, Buddha, and Lenin, and claimed true salvation could only be achieved through him. In 1978, he led over 900 followers, including 300 children, to a remote jungle in Guyana where they were forced to take their own lives. Their bodies were found piled in rows with their faces blue and arms entwined, proof of what happens when a heretic convinces others that he's a god. Serial killer Richard Ramirez quite literally made violence his religion. Breaking into homes at random, he often restrained entire families and carried out horrifying acts in front of them, designed to mentally and physically destroy his victims in their final moments. In multiple cases, he forced his victims to swear allegiance to the devil before killing them, and left pentagrams drawn across walls and even carved into his victim's skin. In one case, the sadistic killer gouged out a woman's eyes while she was still breathing. His crimes weren't just brutal, they were ritualistic expressions of chaos, cruelty, and complete devotion to evil. For nearly 18 years, Frenchman Jean-Claude Roman pretended to be a successful doctor with the WHO despite never graduating from medical school. He lived off of money from family and friends, claiming he was investing it into elite hedge funds. But in 1993, as his elaborate web of lies began to unravel, Roman chose mass murder over being exposed. He bludgeoned his wife to death with a rolling pin, shot his 2 children in the head, then calmly joined his parents for lunch before killing them and their dog. Roman was arrested and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1996, 16-year-old Travis Lewis pleaded guilty to the murder of Sally McKay. While seeking closure, Sally's daughter Martha visited Travis several times while he was in prison, eventually forgiving him for killing her mother. When he got out on parole 23 years later, Martha allowed Travis to move in with her and gave her a job as groundskeeper of her estate. But when she discovered the man was frequently stealing from her, Martha fired Travis and kicked him out. Soon afterwards, Travis broke into Martha's house and stabbed her to death before drowning in a nearby lake while on the run from police.